The Bull Simons Award, named after the legendary Colonel Arthur Bull Simons, is presented annually by the commander of U.S. Special Operations Command as a Lifetime Achievement Award to those who embody the true spirit, values, and skills of the Special Operations warrior. Tonight we honor a man whose career includes several combat operations and major special operations initiatives. His service to Special Operations, both in and out of uniform, spans more than 30 years.
As a young kid, every male in my family that I loved or respected either wore a herringbone twill or a police uniform. So just about every male relative in my family, starting with long-lost relatives who rode in the charge of the Light Brigade, my great-great-grandfather who had fought in the Civil War, my grandfather who was with the American Expeditionary Force, he had 3 sons. They're all in like World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. So our family heritage, spanned quite a bit of military action. So we were a military family, I guess, to put it simply. And so there was no real doubt on what I was going to be. When I was a senior in high school, I joined the National Guard, and my father was still in the Guard, his brother was in the Guard, so it just seemed like the right thing to do. And in fact, my first platoon sergeant was my uncle. He sat me down and he said, son, you're good at this, so you should consider doing it full time. And so I went ahead and went from the Guard to active duty. I signed up with under the Airborne Ranger enlistment option. So I showed up at Fort Stewart, Georgia, and signed into Charlie Company, 1st Battalion, 75th Infantry. And my first company commander was then Captain Grange.
Some 60 Americans are now beginning their 6th day of captivity inside the U.S. Embassy in Tehran.
This picture tells it all. This flag was apparently taken from someone's office inside the United States Embassy. It was burned Tuesday evening outside the embassy's gates. 2 days earlier, several hundred young people, mainly students at Tehran University, had taken over the embassy. We are not occupiers, they said. We have thrown out the occupiers. But instead of chasing all the Americans out of the compound, the Iranians imprisoned them in a building somewhere on these grounds. They have been hostages ever since.
I met Rick Lamb in 1978 when I went to the Ranger Battalion in Savannah. Corporal Lamb, tough guy, team leader, best in the battalion. I know he's the best in Hard Rock Charlie, our company, but best in the battalion. And made a big impression on me. A representative of what non-commissioned officers should be. He was the epitome of a team leader. For Eagle Claw, the Ranger mission in that task force was twofold. One was to secure the extraction airfield. All the hostages, all the assaulters that rescued the hostages. And we also had the mission of securing the road network around Desert One. The 1st Ranger Battalion, and the main part of that force was Charlie Company, Hard Rock Charlie, was the airfield season mission in Mansouriya in Iran. We were the extraction location for the raid, the hostage rescue raid in Tehran. He was part of that mission. Lamb was an integral part in the security of that airfield and the extraction of both hostages and counterterrorism forces out of the AO.
Yeah, being part of Eagle Claw, because again, I was that's my first assignment as a young Ranger. I think I was all of a corporal, and so to us it was exciting. I mean, the train up to it was probably the best.
We relied on him not only for missions like Eagle Claw, but all the readiness training required, new tactics, techniques, procedures. He was instrumental in developing those.
He came to us one day, and he got us all in the day room, basically. And this was after the embassy had been taken by the Iranians. And we were up to that point, we were pretty much Rogers Rangers. I mean, we'd spend Monday through Friday out in the swamps of Fort Stewart, and we were good at 7-8, the infantry, squad and platoon. We were good at small unit tactics, raids, recons, ambushes. But he brought us into the day room, and he said, "All right, Rangers, I want to know who the best snipers are. I need to know who the best machine gunners are. I need to know who owns 4-wheel drive vehicles. as a private vehicle and drives them off-road. I need to know who has motorcycle licenses, who owns dirt bikes and rides those off-road. And I need to know who grew up on farms and who were capable of keeping things running with bubble gum and baling wire, that were comfortable around machines.
He was one of those NCOs that not only did his job as a team leader, but also as a special team leader for certain missions, or being involved in Hard Rock Charlie, the company's planning, development of new ways to do airfield landing procedures, offloads, accountability of people on airfield seizure missions, how to breach certain targets, how to move obstacles off runways, new methods of clearing buildings. In those days, airfield seizures was a new thing for the Rangers. And so he was one of the pioneers that made that happen.
And we realized that there were some subtle nuances to putting an Army Ranger on an Air Force helicopter and then taking that Air Force helicopter and trying to land it and take it off from a carrier deck. We didn't have common tactics, techniques, and procedures. We didn't have common radios. We were the best in the world at what we did within our stovepipes, if you will. But bringing it all together was where we had issues. So that was kind of at the time we didn't realize that. At the time it was just exciting. I mean, we probably took down every airfield west of the Mississippi.
Remember, at that time we had to figure out how to offload the old Jeep, gun Jeeps, motorcycle teams, accountability teams, the medical support teams, and it was techniques where night vision devices were just starting to be used on airfield takedowns. How to incorporate airborne operations with air-land operations. And though a young corporal, because of his enthusiasm, his understanding of the Ranger mission, he was right there with the planning. As you know, of course, the plan was aborted.
2 of our American aircraft collided on the ground following a refueling operation in a remote desert location in Iran.
I remember Corporal Lamb being maybe not quite as disappointed as I was that the mission failed. Pretty close to it.
So we were on our final rehearsal, getting ready to board the planes when they shut the planes down and said, there's been issues on the desert strip, and so they basically told us to sterilize the area, make it we don't want anybody to know that we were here, and then we had pulled out.
And as I had to hold my company together, he held his troopers together.
Yeah, it was gut wrenching. We had I don't know how many months we had prepared for that, and everybody had we were on the razor's edge. So it was pretty depressing. Yeah, the JSA was the furthest north camp. It was Camp Kitty Hawk at the time. I think it's now Camp Boniface. But it was right at the Dropgate 128. So it was right at the southern edge of the military DMZ, the demilitarized zone.
I was put in charge of a combat unit that had a very unique mission. And so I quickly learned that whoever came into that unit, because we had a very high turnover, given the fact that it was a hardship tour on the DMZ, and because we were face-to-face with North Koreans, we had to work with a no-flaw mentality. What we call the Soviet Defector Incident occurred on 23 November 1984. So Vasily Matuzak had planned this defection for a few years. He basically was part of a tour group, and not anybody from the north could come and tour Parmesan because of the security risks and because of the risk of potential defection.
He had asked one of the border guards, one of the North Korean border guards, to go down and take a picture of him down on the MDL. And we know this because it's a picture. He takes the North Korean kid's picture first, and with the U.S. guys in the background. Then they change over the camera, and then while the North Korean kid is taking his picture, he bolts across the military demarcation line, and he runs through the U.S. and the South Korean Guard and says, "I'm defecting."
Matuzak runs across the border, and as he relayed to me later, he was very surprised the North Koreans came after him.
The North Korean kid, he's in big trouble now because he just lost his charge. So he runs, pulls his pistol and runs after him. Well, our guys shoot him in the street, because now you have a North Korean soldier in South Korea with a pistol drawn, chasing a defector. And then after that, all hell breaks loose.
I got a call from the TOC. There was some firing, there was at least one man down, and then some vague mention of a civilian, which didn't really make an impact on me at that point in time. So I basically told the quick reaction force to load trucks, which was our signal to get on board, to start moving.
So, and everybody's looking at me because I'm the dude with the Ranger tab. So they said, what do we do? They're actually in the sunken garden. So at the time we're getting reports from the guys at Checkpoint 4 that they've got a large number of North Koreans in the sunken garden, and so they're basically pinned down. So now the mission changed from secure the defector to now secure the southern half of the truce village.
He had us dismount, and he formed us on line, and we went up at the JSA area. As we were cresting the hill, you could hear the sonic cracks of the bullets passing by. And of course, at that time, I didn't know that they were bullets. All I know is the leaves were moving, trees were losing bark, and I was hearing that little sonic pop.
When Lamb and his squad kind of crashed into the North Korean flank and then moved around them, that bought Matuzak probably a few seconds until the time that we had a chance to get him out of there. You always want to have a proper mix of competence and professionalism, and he led the charge. He inspired his soldiers to follow him in what can only be described as the most dangerous life or death situation. And for all the right reasons, I think that his aggressive maneuvering helped prevent the North Koreans, who initially had more people than we did, from continuing to pursue the defector.
Last night, I ordered U.S. military forces to Panama. Noriega declared his military dictatorship to be in a state of war with the United States. The very next day, forces under his command shot and killed an unarmed American serviceman, wounded another, arrested and brutally beat a third American serviceman. General Noriega's reckless threats and attacks upon Americans in Panama created an imminent danger. At this moment, U.S. forces, including forces deployed from the United States last night, are engaged in action in Panama.
I first met Rick when we worked together in Panama in about, that would have been 88. And he was a senior weapons sergeant on one of the Special Forces teams in C-37.
And then I actually was lucky enough to get an overseas assignment out of the Q course with 3rd Battalion, 7th Group down in Panama. And the neat thing about 3rd Battalion, 7th Group was that they had been there for a long time. And so they had great relationships all throughout Latin America. When Just Cause rolled around, we lived there. I mean, so we had the luxury of being able to know where we were at all the time, being able to have done the target folders, from our base, if you will. So on our D-Day targets basically were to secure the president and vice presidents of Panama. They actually had a brilliant idea, like the night before the invasion, and they invited them all to dinner, and then they just locked them in. So we lost our initial D-Day mission, and so as we were sitting over at Albrook, when everything cranked up, they started sending us against phone exchanges, against television stations, and I think we had just come back from knocking out a TV station, basically just knocking down the lines of communication. And we'd come back to Albrook, and one of the guys, I think it was Brad Smith, turns on a little transistor radio, and he's flipping through the channels, and he hears Noriega giving a speech. So they looked at the radio, they got the channel off the radio. Another guy ran for a phone book, and they flipped open the phone book, and they realized that the radio station was just right down the street on Balboa. And so we didn't know if he was inside or if it was a tape, but we had the dual mission of see if it's him inside, and if it is, capture him, but also knock out that radio station. So they cranked the helicopters, and we flew over to the building, identified the building, and then we fast roped down onto the building.
And when we got on top of the building, sadly, after fast roping and dropping the ropes, there was not the opportunity to see a way off the building.
So they'd only taken in enough charges to knock the tower out. So we didn't have enough charges, demolition charges, to knock the tower, the TV, or the radio station tower out, plus breach the door on the roof to get us inside.
Rick was one of the lead team leaders off the helicopters. Took the fast ropes that had fallen down onto the roof and did a field expedient mechanism to take the fast rope, tie it off, and then do further fast roping down onto a balcony of a restaurant there at the top of the building.
We looked over the edge of the building, and then we lowered ourselves down to the there was like a 19-story building, I think, and we lowered ourselves down to the 18th floor onto a balcony, and then we were able to breach the glass sliding doors on that balcony, and then get into the office complex, and then run back upstairs, let the boys in. I think we went down to, I can't remember the floor that the radio station was on, but it was a tape, and we were successful at knocking the radio station out, but obviously Noriega wasn't there.
But despite a sustained aerial sweep of the area by US Rangers, the militia controlled by warlord General Aidid remains at large. The man himself has also evaded all attempts at capture and is believed to be responsible for the latest outrage. Latest reports from Mogadishu say 7 Nigerian peacekeeping soldiers and 15 local civilians were killed in a shootout. The United States has now stationed 400 crack army rangers in the country to find Aidid. General Aidid has eluded capture since June, when he went to ground after 24 Pakistani peacekeepers were killed in coordinated ambushes.
We deployed to Mogadishu in late August of 1993, and our mission as far as Task Force Ranger was just to dismantle the Somali National Alliance leadership infrastructure. But we weren't there to provide security. Our mission was manhunting. We were going after Mohammed Farah Aidid and all of his lieutenants.
It was actually a Sunday. 3 October was a Sunday, which traditionally had been a down day for the task force. Idea was quick in, secure the target, and then quick out.
We launched on the mission at 15:33 in the afternoon. Within minutes of conducting the air assault raid on the target building, the 2 lieutenants that were going after were captured. And as we were getting ready to exfiltrate or to leave, the 2 Ranger platoons and the Special Forces assaulters that were on the target, as we were getting ready to leave the objective areas when the first Black Hawk got shot down. There was a large crowd to our north that there was a lot of shooting going on outside of the building. All of the Ranger positions were under direct small arms fire. Hand grenades were being thrown over the walls. Everything was very, very close proximity as far as the fighting goes. Several of us raced a crowd to get to the crash site first, and we did, and we were able to successfully defend the crash site throughout the afternoon and into the entire evening.
The convoy going back, as we listened to the debriefs afterwards, was a terrible firefight. One where the convoy is riddled with RPGs and automatic weapons fire. They're losing individuals, KIAs, having individuals wounded in action, and they're fighting their way back, trying to get to the airfield.
Once the birds went down, then we immediately scrambled a convoy. We tried to link up with the 10th Mountain. They were coming from the north of the city. We were coming up from the south, and each element had got repulsed, so we had to turn around and come back.
So I don't know if I could even paint the picture for you, but imagine 5-ton trucks and Humvees coming out of the city. The sun is getting ready to go down. They've been ambushed the entire way back, from the objective area back. They have prisoners that are wounded. They have American soldiers that are wounded and killed. The call then goes out by the commander to every able-bodied Ranger that is at the airfield, to include the headquarters, the administrative guys, the clerks, the company clerks, the cooks, all of the staff personnel, everybody. Grab a rifle. We're going to wash out the trucks, and you're going back in the city to try to reinforce the objective.
This is the beauty of having someone like Rick Lamb in your formation. You know, a senior non-commissioned officer, well experienced, has been around a bit, not a stranger to firefights, but at the same time, able to bring a steady, calming leadership to a very chaotic situation, dealing with young soldiers who have not seen this type of fighting previously. They've now seen their friends have been wounded or killed, and we're asking them get back in the fight, get back on these vehicles that didn't protect you the first time, and we need you to get out here and move to a place where we can effect a rescue operation. It's tremendous leadership, and again, having someone like Rick Lamb out there, that's exactly what you needed at the time.
You look into the eyes of the kids that they had just come back. I mean, you're inside the perimeter, you're safe, and you could just see, the kind of the blood drain out of their faces. They knew we got to go back out, and but it goes back to that Ranger creed that you just look at them and say, listen, guys, we knew this was going to be tough when we signed up. You motivate them a little bit.
The first Humvee was a upgunned Humvee with a machine gun, and it would go through an intersection and shoot the corners of the intersection, and all the smallies would get down. And the second Humvee would come through, and they would shoot, and all the smallies would get down. And then he'd come through. He said, I'd come through, and all the smallies would jump up, and they'd shoot, ting, ting, ting. And he said, it was crazy. What am I doing in the third Humvee?
There was an RPG flash off to the right-hand side. You could hear the guys in the back of the truck yelling RPG, and everything slowed down to the point where you could almost follow it with your eyes. And it hit in the alleyway, basically to my left. I kind of remember my head going back and watching a spurt of blood go down and hit the running lights on the dashboard. And I remember swearing under my breath, going, "Damn it, I just got killed." And then everything went to like a white, pristine point of light. Everything got quiet. I was almost feeling pretty good, because you're wet, you're sweaty, it's noisy, it's stinky, and everything was just feeling kind of Nirvana-ish. And then I remember just focusing on that white spot of light, and then thinking about my kid. Thinking, man, I just had a kid. What's going to happen to my wife? And then the next thing I remember is guys hitting me in the back of the helmet, going, "Don't stop here, don't stop here."
He got to Walter Reed, and they took a frontal X-ray, and there was a thin gray line where that dot had been. He took a side view, and it was like a razor blade, a triangular razor blade, had gone straight into his head and right between the lobes in his brain. And the doctor told him, "You know what, I'm good enough to get that out, but I wouldn't have been good enough to put that in."
I'm telling you right now, and I wish I could tell everybody this, is if it wasn't for what the ground vehicles did, if the ground vehicles, the Malaysians and the Americans, 10th Mountain Division and Rick's convoy, if they had not persisted, if they had not made it, we would not have survived at the crash site.
I know of no person that I would put ahead of him in terms of being a soft warrior his whole life, a person of character and integrity his whole life.
I spent 20 plus years in the military. I saw a lot of non-commissioned officers, and there are a few of them that stick out very easily in my memory as some of the best, and Rick is absolutely one of them.
Corporal Lamb was not only tough, and I mean physically and mentally tough, the cut of cloth it takes to be an NCO in a Ranger battalion. He led the way in the Rangers and set the example for a lot of young troops, as well as the other NCOs and officers alike. He was a go-to guy.
But so I think Rick Lamb epitomized the aggressive warrior spirit that we needed there, but was also tempered by just being a true professional. He knew what the boundaries were.
From the moment you see Rick Lamb, he looks like Sergeant Rock, and he's got a personality that's a mile wide and at least a quarter mile deep. He's as fun could be, and I just had a distinct impression of I was fortunate to have a gentleman like that working in the same company with me.
you know that there are others out there that if you don't go to them, if you don't step forward, they're going to die. And what you see here is you see Rick Lamb, who takes the fear that had to be probably within the formation and probably his own personal fear, overcome that through leadership and get this force back into the fight.
What I seen him do during that firefight and what he influenced me to stand by him and do the same thing, expose ourselves as we did, you tell me how good of a leader he was. I followed him.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Bull Simons Award winner for 2015, Command Sergeant Major Richard Lamb.